Lowesett wakes in layers. First comes the light, thin and gray, slipping over the roofs along Maple Street and settling into the narrow yards between houses. Then the distant hum of Route 9 beginning to stir beyond the trees. Eventually, the bakery truck from Denton rattles down Main, always a few minutes before 6. Michael Harlan is awake before any of it. 20 years on the route has trained his body to rise at 5:12 a.m. without an alarm. Even on Sundays, his eyes open at the same minute. He lies still for a moment when he wakes, not listening for anything specific, just taking inventory of the quiet that fills the house before the day settles into it. The house is modest. 2 bedrooms, a finished attic he insulated one winter when money ran tight. The floors hold the cold longer than they should. In October, the air inside carries a faint scent of orange and clove because his wife keeps a small pot simmering on the stove. In February, it smells like the radiator heat and dust. Michael moves carefully down the hallway. His wife is still asleep, one arm tucked beneath her pillow. She worked late at the assisted living center on Birch. And some weeks their schedules pass like this. Her coming home as he's leaving. Conversations reduced to notes on the counter and quiet exchanges in doorways. It has never felt strained to Michael. Just the rhythm of 2 adults who understand each other's hours. He pauses long enough to pull the blanket slightly higher over her shoulder before heading into the kitchen. The kettle goes on. The same blue ceramic mug waits near the sink, the glaze worn pale where his thumb rests every morning. He can't remember when they bought it. It's just always been there. He dropped out of college at 21. There was no dramatic fallout, no failure that forced him home. He just couldn't picture the version of himself who would finish. He returned to Lowesett for a year, was what he told himself. He took a job delivering mail at the post office to cover gas and groceries while he figured things out. Then he never left. At first, the job was temporary. Then it was practical. And then it became familiar. Michael Harlan didn't fall into it. He grew into it. 20 years later, there's comfort in knowing the sequence of things. Which streets catch early sun, which porches hold frost longer into the morning, which houses have dogs that bark, and which ones that have grown too old to bother anymore. Lowesett isn't large. You can drive from one end to the other in under 10 minutes if the blinking light on Main cooperates. There's a grocery store everyone complains about but still relies on. A hardware store that has survived 3 different owners, 2 churches, and a field where a factory once stood before a fire took it down. The houses sit with space between them. Not acres, but enough yard to breathe. Enough trees to break sight lines. Enough distance that when someone stands at a window, you don't always notice unless you're already looking. He likes that about the town. He likes knowing what comes next. Boots by the back door, keys on the hook, the soft thud of the screen closing behind him. The truck starts in the second turn of the ignition. Nothing in Lowesett rushes, and neither does he. The morning holds its quiet easily. The post office sits just off Main. Its brick faded to a color somewhere between red and brown, and a flagpole leaning slightly the way it has for as long as he can remember. Inside, the air smells of paper dust and coffee that's been sitting too long on the warming plate. He has worked beside the same 4 people for years. Sorting doesn't require much conversation. The rhythm takes over once the mail starts moving. He flips through envelopes with the ease of repetition, slotting, stacking, rubber banding bundles without needing to read every line. After 2 decades, he can recognize most addresses by the angle of the script before he registers the name. He doesn't rush. He doesn't need to. His route begins 3 turns past the blinking light on Main. Oak comes later. Birch after that. The streets curve slightly instead of running straight, remnants of old property lines from when the land was divided instead of planned. By 8:40, he's walking. The houses aren't pressed together, but they aren't isolated either. 10 or 15 yards between most of them. Enough space for vegetable patches, uneven fences, old swing sets that haven't been used in years. Mature maples stretch high enough to shadow second-story windows, and in certain stretches, the tree cover thickens enough that the road feels briefly enclosed. The first house belongs to Mrs. Johnson. She waits near the door most mornings, not right against it, but visible through the narrow pane of glass along the side. She's in her 70s, hair pinned back, cardigan even in July. She prefers her mail handed directly to her. "Morning," she says, in the same even tone each day. "Morning." Neither lingers. That's the agreement. 2 houses down, the Keller's dog begins barking before he reaches the walkway. The fence is missing a slat near the bottom, and the dog throws its weight against the boards as though today might finally be the day he breaks through. It never does. He doesn't even flinch anymore. Near the bend in the road, the pale yellow house has a porch step that sinks slightly in the center. He steps over it automatically. He couldn't say when he first noticed it, only that his body learned the adjustment and he never forgot. There's a longer stretch between streets where the factory once stood before it burned. Now it's mostly grass and a bench no one uses. Wind moves differently there, without walls to interrupt it. The sound carries farther. He likes that part of the route. He doesn't wear headphones, never has. Some of the younger carriers do. Just something to pass the time. One of them once told him it made the day go by faster. He doesn't want it to go faster. He listens instead. Wind shifting through leaves. A car door closing somewhere behind him. A mower starting 2 streets over. Birds cutting through the quiet without disturbing it. Lowesett has its own volume. It rises mid-morning, settles again near noon, hums gently by afternoon. He knows where it will be louder and where it will thin out. He knows which houses sit still and which ones leak noise into the yard. The silence isn't empty. It's layered. And over time, it has come to feel like something that belongs to him. Or at least something he understands well enough not to question. When he walks between houses, there are moments when no one is visible at all. No doors opening, no engine starting. Just a steady weight of envelopes in his satchel and the sound of his own steps against the pavement. He doesn't feel alone in those stretches. He feels steady. The route loops back on itself. It always returns him to where he started. By the time he reaches Birch, he can predict the exact weight left in the bag without looking. Nothing surprises him, and nothing interrupts the quiet. And that, more than anything, is what he values. The first letter arrived on a Wednesday, folded into his usual midweek weight of circulars and utility bills. He's at his case, working through the stack with the same practiced rhythm he's used for 2 decades, when he notices an envelope that doesn't match the others. Paper is thicker. The address is handwritten in dark ink instead of machine printed. There's no return label in the corner. He checks the name automatically and pauses when he sees it. It's his. Not the post office box, not the building. His home address, his name written carefully, evenly as if the person who addressed it took their time. It isn't unheard of. People who know him sometimes send personal mail through the office instead of directly to the house. Holiday cards, forwarded notices, the occasional thank you from someone on the route. He sets it aside without comment and continues sorting. He's never liked breaking the flow of a task halfway through. Only once he's in the truck, engine idling low and lot, does he slide a finger beneath the sail and open it. Inside is a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. It simply reads, "Before the corner on Oak, you switch the mail to your left hand." Michael reads it once, and then again, slower. There's no tone to the sentence, no accusation, no threat. It doesn't ask anything of him. It simply states a fact. He leans back against the seat and pictures the route in his mind. The slight curve before Oak. The cracked section of sidewalk near the hiding place. The way the sun hits the corner mid-morning. Does he switch hands there? It's possible. After this many years, his body makes adjustments without consulting him. A shoulder tightens, or a wrist grows sore. He rotates the stack, shifts the satchel, compensates without thinking about it. He wouldn't be surprised if he's done it for years without noticing. Still, the specificity holds his attention longer than he expects. He folds the paper once and slips it back into the envelope. Inside the building, someone laughs near the sorting tables. A chair scrapes against the tile. Normal sounds. He steps back in and finds Rob near the parcel bins. "You ever get anything like this?" he asks casually, handing the envelope over. Rob glances at it, reads the line, and shrugs almost immediately. "Probably one of your regulars," he says. "You've been out there long enough. People notice stuff." "Notice enough to write it down?" "Who knows," he says. "People get bored." Rob hands it back and returns to sorting his mail. The moment already finished for him. It lands that way. Small. Not worth carrying. Out on the route, the day unfolds the way Wednesdays usually do. Mrs. Johnson isn't at the door when he reaches her house. He pauses slightly longer than usual before sliding her mail through the slot, half expecting to hear her shuffle inside. Nothing follows. He assumes she's at an appointment or still in bed. 2 houses down, the Keller's dog begins barking on cue. At the pale yellow house near the end, the porch step dips as it always has, and he steps over it without looking. When he reaches the long stretch where the factory once stood, the wind moves across the open grass the way it always does, carrying sound farther than it should. Everything is as it has been. But when he approaches the curve before Oak, he becomes aware of his hands. His right hand holds the stack against his chest. His left swings loosely at its side. He slows slightly. Not enough for anyone watching to notice. If anyone were watching. He rounds the corner. Without thinking, he shifts the mail to his left hand. The motion feels automatic. But this time he feels it happen. He looks down at his grip as if expecting something to be different about it. He stands there for a moment. Then he continues on. The rest of the route finished uneventfully. By late afternoon, the letter feels less significant than it did that morning. Curious, maybe, but not unsettling. When he gets home, he sets the envelope on the kitchen counter near the sink. He means to mention it to his wife, but he forgets. The house is quiet. The town is quiet. The second letter doesn't arrive the next day. If it had, Michael might have taken it more seriously. Instead, nearly 2 weeks pass. Long enough for the first one to become something he occasionally remembers while walking, then forgets again by the time he reaches the truck. Long enough for Mrs. Johnson to resume waiting at the door. Long enough for the rhythm of the route to smooth itself back into place. It's another mid-morning at the case when he sees the handwriting again. The envelope is the same weight, same thick paper, same deliberate script. Michael Harlan. His name looks steadier than it should. He doesn't wait until he reaches his truck this time. He opens it standing beside his case, carefully along the edge. One line. At the third house after the stop sign, you look in before you knock. He feels something different this time. Not fear, but recognition. He knows exactly which house that is. The gray one with the narrow front windows and the brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. A woman in her 30s lives there with her son. She quite often receives packages that require a signature. Does he look in before he knocks? He tries to picture it. The reflection in the glass. The habit of glancing to see if someone is already walking toward the door. That isn't unusual. Carriers do it all the time. But written down, it reads differently. He folds the paper carefully and slips it back inside the envelope. Rob notices him lingering. Another one, he asks. Michael nods once and hands it over. Rob reads it, gives it a low whistle. See? Told you. Somebody paying attention. To what? You. Rob doesn't mean anything by it. The words land casually, without weight. Michael shrugs and takes the letter back. Probably someone bored. Or someone who likes patterns. Rob smiles faintly and moves on. Michael doesn't like that phrasing as much as he expects to. On the route, he becomes aware of the third house after the stop sign long before he reaches it. The red octagon stands at the corner of Maple and Crestview. He pauses there, not because of traffic, but because that's what you do. One house, 2, 3. The gray siding is freshly painted this year. The brass lion still holds the knocker in its mouth. He walks up the path, package in hand. He tells himself he won't alter anything. He won't perform. He won't test it. When he reaches the door, he lifts his hand to knock. And before his knuckles touch the wood, his eyes shift to the glass pane beside it. It's reflexive, a brief glance. Inside, the living room is dim. A television glows blue against the far wall. No one stands there. He knocks. The sound feels louder than usual. When the woman answers, she smiles in the same distracted way she always does, apologizing for taking a second to reach the door. Everything about the exchange is normal, but as he steps back down the path, he feels aware of the space behind him in a way he hadn't before. He becomes aware of the space behind him, not because anything changes, but because he now considers that it might. The curtains in the house across the street shift slightly. Wind, most likely. The trees move in uneven patterns all morning. Still, he glances over his shoulder before reaching the sidewalk. The rest of the route unfolds without event. The Keller's dog barks. Mrs. Johnson thanks him for the catalog. The stretch near the old factory carries wind the same way it always has. Yet the long spaces between houses feel subtly altered. The quiet isn't different in sound. It's different in direction. That evening at home, he mentions the letters to his wife while she stands at the sink doing dishes. Mike, it's probably someone bored, she says without turning around. Or someone trying to be funny. Funny how? She shrugs lightly. You walk the same streets every day. People notice things. He leans against the counter, watching the water spiral down the drain. Well, I don't like that they notice. She dries her hands and finally looks at him. You're in public all day. It's not like they're in the house. He nods. That's true. He tells her he'll throw the letters out, but he doesn't. Instead, he folds them both and places them in the top drawer of the small desk in the living room, beneath a stack of old warranty papers and unused batteries. The house settles into its usual nighttime quiet. Lowesett does the same. But when he lies in bed, eyes open in the dark, he finds himself replaying small movements from the route, moments he has never once thought about before. The way he adjusts his grip, the way he pauses at corners, the way he glances at windows without meaning to. He tells himself it's nothing. He closes his eyes. Outside, the town holds its silence, and for the first time, he wonders who else is listening to it. Another 2 weeks pass before the third letter arrives. By then, the first two have settled into something he thinks about more often than he wants to admit. Not constantly, just in flashes. When he approaches Oak, when he nears the stop sign, when he finds himself glancing at windows and catching the movement mid-action. The envelope is identical to the others. Same weight, same deliberate handwriting. Michael Harlan. He opens it in the truck again, parked just beyond the post office lot where the pavement dips slightly before the road. Inside, another single sentence. At the second house on Birch, you touch the glass before you turn away. Michael reads it twice, then a third time. The second house on Birch. He knows it immediately. White siding, narrow front steps, a storm door with a wide pane of glass. An older couple lives there, though lately only the husband answers. The wife has been sick for months. Does he touch the glass? He tries to picture the motion, reaching forward after sliding the mail through, adjusting something, steadying himself on the frame. Nothing comes clearly. That unsettles him more than the sentence itself. He folds the letter slowly and rests his hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield without seeing the road. It would be easy to dismiss if it were vague, but it isn't. It's specific. On Birch, he feels the awareness before he reaches the house. The street is quiet in a way that it often is mid-morning. No engines running, no doors open. A light wind moves the branches overhead. First house. Second. He approaches the white siding and tells himself not to change anything, not to overthink it. He slides the mail through the slot in the storm door. He turns to leave, and his hand lingers. Just for a fraction of a second. His fingertips brush the glass. He freezes. Not because someone is there, not because anything moves, but because he doesn't know whether that's something he's always done. He pulls his hand back immediately, as if the surface were hot. He stands on the step longer than he should. He steps down and continues along the sidewalk, but the space between houses feels altered in a way he can't articulate. Not louder, not darker, just aware. He doesn't mention this letter at work. He keeps it folded in his pocket through the rest of the route. That evening, he sets it on the kitchen table without comment. His wife notices the envelope almost immediately. There's another one, she asks, just slightly at the corners. That's specific, she says. He watches her carefully. Do you think it's someone on the route? I don't know. Maybe. You're visible all day, Michael. It's not impossible. Later that night, after she's asleep, he opens the drawer on the living room desk and places the third letter beneath the others. He doesn't smooth them flat. He doesn't reread them. He just closes the drawer and stands there for a moment longer than necessary, listening to the house settle. Outside, Lowesett holds its usual quiet. But walking through it tomorrow will feel different. Not because anything has changed, because now he'll be measuring himself against it. 4 days after the third letter, another envelope appears. By then, the anticipation has begun to form its own quiet pattern. Michael doesn't look for the envelope outright, but he notices immediately when he doesn't see it. He tells himself that noticing the absence means he has let it matter too much. When it finally appears, it's waiting in the stack as if it has always been there. Same paper, same weight, same careful handwriting. Michael Harlan. He doesn't open it at the case. He doesn't wait for the truck. He tears it open standing exactly where he is. The paper inside holds only 2 words. Still watching. He reads them once. There is no location this time, no detail, no corner or house or motion attached to it. Just continuation. He folds the paper carefully and slips it back into his pocket. Rob says something across the room. Something about a misprint on a parcel label. But Michael doesn't register it. Outside, the morning looks like every other morning. The sky is pale. The air holds the kind of cool that will burn off by noon. The truck door shuts with its usual hollow thud. The route begins. Mrs. Johnson greets him at the door. The Keller's dog throws itself against the fence. The porch step near the bend dips slightly in the center. Nothing's out of place. And yet, the quiet feels directional now. When he walks between houses, he feels the distance differently. The yards seem wider than they used to. The gaps between windows longer. He finds himself straightening his posture unconsciously, aware of the way he moves his shoulders, the way he grips the stack of envelopes. He doesn't change what he does. He just notices it. The long stretch where the factory once stood feels less like open air and more like exposure. Wind moves across the grass the same way it always has, but he no longer enjoys the absence of walls. He keeps his eyes forward. At Oak, he doesn't think about his hands. At the stop sign, he doesn't count the houses. On Birch, he doesn't look at the storm door. He walks the route exactly as he always has. But the silence no longer feels like something he shares with the town. It feels occupied. That night, he doesn't show his wife the letter immediately. He sits at the kitchen table after dinner, fingers resting against the wood, the folded paper in his pocket. She notices the distance before she notices the envelope. "Mike," she says gently, "what is it?" He takes the paper out and slides it across the table. She reads it once and sets it down. "That's it?" she asks. "That's it?" They sit with the words between them. "You could tell someone," she says finally, "at work or..." "And say what?" he asks, not sharply, just tired. "Someone knows I walk?" She doesn't answer right away. "It's probably someone who just thinks they're being clever." He nods, though the word doesn't fit the way it used to. Clever implies distance. This didn't feel distant. Later, when he places the 4th letter in the drawer with the others, he notices his hand hesitating before letting it go. He closes the drawer. On the route the next morning, nothing dramatic happens. No one steps out unexpectedly. No windows open. No one calls his name. But empty porches feel intentional. Quiet houses feel occupied. He walks straighter than he needs to. And when he reaches the long stretch between streets, he no longer lingers in the wind. The letters stop after that. No fifth envelope. No explanation. Just absence. At first, Michael notices the absence as sharply as he noticed their arrival. Each morning at the case, his eyes skim the stack with a quiet, reluctant expectation. When he doesn't see the thick paper or the careful handwriting, he feels something close to relief, though it takes him a while to admit that's what it is. Days pass, and then months. Lowesett continues in its ordinary way. The leaves change along Maple, burning briefly into orange before thinning out and settling along the sidewalks. The first frost comes earlier than predicted. Mrs. Johnson passes in late winter. It isn't unexpected. The house sits empty through March before a young couple moves in. They remove the storm door with a narrow side glass and install a new mailbox at the edge of the porch. Nothing about the town shifts. Only his attention does. In the beginning, he continues to scan windows without meaning to. His posture remains slightly straighter than it once was. On Birch, he finds himself conscious of his hands as he approaches the white-sided house, careful not to let them linger against the glass. Over time, the awareness dulls. Not completely. It never disappears entirely, but it softens. The long stretch where the factory once stood begins to feel open again instead of exposed. The quiet between houses returns to something familiar rather than directional. By winter, he realized he has gone several days without thinking about the letters at all. He doesn't say that aloud. At home, life resumes its steady shape. His wife moves from late shifts to earlier ones. They eat dinner at the same time more often. They sit together on the couch in the evenings, television low, neither fully watching. Once, in the early spring, she asks him if he had heard anything more. No, he says simply. Good. He nods. He doesn't mention that the letters are still in the desk drawer. He has not thrown them away. He tells himself that he keeps them because discarding them would make the whole thing feel unfinished, or worse, dismissed. The year folds over itself quietly. The grocery store replaces its flickering sign. The hardware store changes hands again. The field where the factory once stood grows a little thicker with wild grass. The Keller's dog barks. The porch step near the bend dips slightly in the center. Michael walks the route the same way he always has. And eventually, the silence returns to something close to what it once was. Not untouched, but manageable. He stops measuring his movements. Stops wondering who might be observing. Stops replaying small gestures in his mind at night. If he notices a curtain shift across the street, he attributes it to the wind. If a door opens just as he passes, he doesn't assume timing. The town feels neutral again. By the time summer arrives, he can say, honestly, that the letters have become something distant. A strange stretch of weeks that now feels smaller than it did at the time. He does not consider the possibility that absence can be its own kind of patience. It happens again in late August. The morning is already warm when Michael finishes sorting. The air inside the post office carries the late summer heaviness that makes paper feel softer at the edges. He pulls his satchel over his shoulder and reaches for a small stack of the loose mail resting on the edge of his hot case. A thin bundle, secured with a rubber band, sits slightly out of place among the sorted flats. Pieces that were thrown later slipped into the wrong route during the morning rush. He glances at the top address automatically and recognizes the street. Crestview. It's his. He tucks the bundle beneath his arm without thinking. Missorts happen all the time. Magazines get tossed into the wrong slot. Clerks catch most of it before carriers leave, but not all. It's part of the rhythm. He heads for the door. He doesn't look at them immediately. He starts his route the way he always does. Keller's dog barks, porch step dips. The morning unfolds with the same familiar pacing. It isn't until he reaches the long stretch near the old factory field that he stops to separate the mis-sorted stack from the rest. He flips through them absently at first. Utility bill, catalog, padded mailer, postcard. Then he sees it. Thicker paper. Handwritten address. The ink has not changed. Michael Harlan. His stomach doesn't drop. His pulse doesn't spike. He just knows. He stands there in the open stretch of grass and tears the envelope along the top, the wind catching the loose edge of paper as he unfolds it. One line. At the house with the new mailbox, you still pause. He reads it again. Slower. The new mailbox. Installed in spring, black metal, mounted lower than the old slot in the storm door. The young couple had it up within a week of moving in. He folds the paper carefully, his fingers steady, though he can feel the weight of the year settling into the moment. He does not need to test it. He knows exactly what it means. He stands in the open field longer than he should, the paper shifting slightly in the breeze. Nothing around him changes. No doors open, no voices call out. The wind moves across the grass the way it always has. The town continues. He slips the letter into his pocket and resumes the route. At the house with the new mailbox, he approaches it without slowing. He places the envelope inside and turns away. He does not look toward where Mrs. Johnson once stood. He does not hesitate in the step, and he does not allow himself to measure the pause. The young couple's car is in the driveway. Curtains move faintly in the window. Nothing unusual. Michael walks on. The Keller's dog barks. The porch step near the bend dips slightly in the center. The long stretch by the old factory carries wind across the open field. Everything in Lowesett remains as it was. But the quiet no longer feels shared. It no longer feels neutral. Michael finishes the route without altering a single step. That evening, he does not show the letter to his wife. He does not open the desk drawer. He sits at the kitchen table, listening to the house settle around him. The refrigerator humming, the pipes shifting softly in the walls. Outside, the town holds its silence the way it always has. Only now, he understands something he did not before. Silence does not mean absence. It means someone is choosing not to interrupt it. The next morning, Michael Harlan wakes at 5:12 a.m. The light comes in gray and thin. The town stirs in layers. He lies still for a moment, taking inventory of the quiet. And for the first time in 20 years, it does not feel like his.